Welcome to Minds on a Mission, the podcast where we explore the journeys that challenge us, change us, and chart the course for our best selves. You can find us on pretty much any platform of your choice. I'm your host, Samantha Bailey, an entrepreneur and a content creator. Oh, and today's lovely guest is Marianne Hickman.
How's it
Woo!
going? Thanks for having me, Samantha. I know we've been trying to set this up back and forth for a while, and we did it. And we got it
Yeah,
done.
it took some coordinating. I know. I was like, oh, things happen, but I'm so glad to get you here because I'm like, so, for those who may not know you, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a mom of six, first and foremost. That's one of the most important things, as well as a wife. So those are my biggest priorities. And while I do that, I teach public speaking to high-level entrepreneurs. And the reason we do that is that speaking is the number one thing that's going to get you in front of your ideal audience. And there's left, right, and sideways of speaking. The biggest problem I run into is that people who have great content, they've got great modalities, they know how to execute it, they know how to help people, but they don't know how to present themselves on stage. That's a problem. So that's what I teach is the core of and the fundamentals of turning your story into something that's consumable by your audience, teaching your body language, teaching your tonalities, and making your presentation rock on stage. And then, we help you with the back end of it too, but that's the core of who we are and what we do.
I
And
love
I
that.
say we 'cause my husband does it with me, so he's all in there.
Right. I want to dive more into that, but I was thinking, speaking of stage, I was wondering if we could kind of talk a little bit about how we first met, because that's kind of like a full circle thing where you were on stage and I actually went to a Chris Crone event, and that's like how we officially first met.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've run so many events, Samantha. I got to be honest. I can't remember which one it was that we met at. I want to
I
hear from your perspective because I remember seeing you and we even have pictures together, like on your Facebook profile. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Right. Yeah. It was the May 2023 UFD event.
Okay. So it's been almost 2 years. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was honestly, yeah. I've only been to one official event. Like, I've been to a real estate event in my state, but like outside of that, like actually going somewhere for a full on event, that was my first like real experience. And it was cool because I don't know if you remember Haley. She went with me. She's my
I
friend.
do. Yeah.
We both were working at the same daycare, and it was just like it's one of those things where like it's divine timing. Like, the odds that me and her met and we had the same interests. Like, I had no idea that she even knew who Chris Crone was, or like even was interested in entrepreneurship. So that was like kind of how we got to going there, because we both had the same interests, and we're like, listen, we don't know how, but we're gonna go to this event. Like, she ended up getting a course that had 2 VIP tickets, and we were like, we don't know how we're gonna do it. So we ended up going there. It was really cool, and that's where I first seen you, and I was like, wow, I loved it with you dancing on the stage, and like, and then with you speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, I look up to her so much. Like, she's so
Oh, you're
awesome.
so nice. You're so nice. No, been a really cool thing. I actually am not on that stage anymore. And we've created our own stages. My goal and my mission is to find people with good messages that I can get behind because honestly, I don't want to work with speakers whose messages I can't support. If you're speaking on something I don't believe in, or if you're speaking on something that's counterproductive to my values, I won't work with you. But the people that I do work with, my goal is to get them on 1 million stages and help them make $1 billion doing it because a lot of people, they don't know how to monetize a stage. They don't know how to appropriately leverage the stage. They don't know how to, like, most people choke at 2 points. One, when they first get on stage because they're super nervous and they don't know how to handle it. Or two, when it's time to do their call to action, they get in their head and they get super salesy or they get nervous about being super salesy. Nobody likes that energy, not the presenter, not the audience. So my goal is to find the appropriate call to action for your speech, for your keynote, lead the audience through it so that everyone feels like they're winning, and then build your business based on that integrity.
Right. Well, I I don't know all that much about it. I'm still learning. I'm only 21, but I definitely agree with like the salesy part, because actually it was funny, a while ago I went on a whole rant on my Facebook like about an interaction I had, and that was basically the basis of it. It was too salesy, and I was saying like, people aren't going to want to work with you if they don't feel like you're genuine about what you're presenting. So it's like I very much agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we can smell it too. We're smart. We've been around the industry long enough, especially here in Utah, that coaches are a dime a dozen because there's no standardized requirements for coaching. But it's this gut check, and sometimes we have to pay a lot of tuition. Sometimes we have to pay a high price. Sometimes we have to hire the wrong coaches and the wrong mentors in order to find how what's the right one? Who's the right coach? Who's the right mentor? And how do we know it's for me? And I would say, and I tell everyone this, especially my door has been knocked on, especially recently with Marianne. I want your advice on this. I'm dealing with this tough situation. This thing is falling apart. What do I do? Do you trust this person? All of these things. Two parts to this. Number one, your reputation will precede you, not follow you. Your reputation will get ahead of you wherever you go. So all of that to say, be a person of integrity, be a person that you would introduce your mom to. You'd be comfortable introducing your friend's mom to you in the way you do business. Number two is follow your gut. And I tell people this, it feels like multiple times a week. Follow your gut. If your gut is telling you that something is sideways, listen to that. Now, there's a big difference between following your gut and listening to limiting beliefs. Those are not the same thing. If you're making decisions based in fear, that's a problem, even if it's the right decision. If you decide not to work with a coach because you're afraid of, where the money's going to come from, or you're afraid of not being successful, I wouldn't listen to that because fear gives terrible advice. But if your gut is telling you, okay, regardless of the price, regardless of the results, I'm not matching with this person, the vibe feels off, man, you're going to save yourself some time and energy.
Yeah. And trying to sort my thoughts. But my first thought about that is like I definitely have been in that situation where it's like, especially how I feel, it's like I'm so young. I feel like there's so much that I don't know about, that I feel like I've definitely been in situations where the person, because I felt, even if I didn't feel 100% sure about what I was doing, it was like, oh, well, they've been in the game longer, they know more, maybe I should trust what they're saying, even if I didn't feel 100% certain about it. And
Mhm.
it ended up biting me in the butt. So it's very much a thing of like, even if you feel like, okay, oh, I'm young or I don't know what I'm doing or blah, blah, like, very much agree with still going with your gut, because there's something in there that's telling you, I know deep down I shouldn't be doing this, and it's flagging for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. But and that being said, none of us are getting out of here without making a huge amount of mistakes. It's just not going to happen. We
I
know we're going to mess up. Nobody here on this planet, no matter how successful either of us, can perceives them to be, no matter how much success they've actually had, no matter what, none of us are getting out here without a huge amount of mistakes. In
right.
my mind, let's make those as fast as possible. Let's make decisions as fast as possible. Let's fail as fast as possible, because if we're going to fail anyway, it's like staring down a toad that you have to eat. Don't stare at it. Just do it. Just do it.
Mhm.
Go with your gut and make decisions as fast as possible. And that's going to do two things for you. The first thing it's going to do for you is teach you how to trust yourself and teach you that you are the one that can be trusted because you're the only one that's going to be with you your entire life. Number two, it's going to fast forward your learning curve because you're making decisions 10 times faster than the 21-year-old next to you, or the 18-year-old next to you, or the 45-year-old next to you. And you're going to be so much more advanced because you got the failures faster. And I have to tell you, failure teaches us so much more than success. I remember I was doing a speech competition when I was like 12, and I went to the initial round of this competition and I won it. I was like, "Oh, cool." And there was this like pat on the back, really cool feeling because I won the speech competition, but I didn't know why I won. I didn't know what the judges were looking for, so I didn't know how to do it again. I went to the second round because I was a first place winner. I went to the regionals. I won that. And I was like, "Okay, cool. Pat on the back. I got the medal." But I didn't get any feedback. I didn't know how to make it better. So by the time I went to state, I ended up losing that competition, I believe, because I didn't have any feedback on how I could have gotten better. People were all just, congratulations, good job. And I'm like, great, but what did I do? What did I do? And I got no feedback on that, which is why I believe I didn't take first in that competition. I have started more businesses, launched more products, gotten so much further by things that I didn't win or things that I failed at than I have my first time success stories.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. Cause it's like with those things, it's obviously so easy to be like, wow, I wish I didn't do that. Or, you know what I mean? Like this decisions where I'm like, oh, I should have gone with my gut. But then I'm also like, I wouldn't have known. Okay, maybe you shouldn't have done that had I not done it. Cause it's like, it wouldn't have even been a thing of reflecting on it. Cause I'm like, okay, wow, I really don't like how that felt. I don't want to
Right.
go through that again. So then it's like, it just provokes more thought, which, like, I definitely agree. It's like, there's a balance of it. It's like obviously we want to avoid mistakes, but then also it's like, but how do you learn unless you make them? So
Exactly.
I agree with that. So how did you know that speaking was something that you wanted to do in your life?
I don't think I did. If I'm being
Yeah.
completely honest, I had no idea. You know what's been interesting is my mom and my dad are in their 80s. My dad just had his 81st birthday. And over the last couple of years, there's a lot that comes with that. And those of you that with older parents, you know what that means. It means like, you and your siblings are starting to get ready for things. My mom is actually offloaded all of her journals to one of my other sisters so that she can transcribe them and we can look through her history. I have to tip my hat to my mom because she has written in her journal every single day without fail since 1987,
Wow.
which is incredible. I mean, that's close to 40 years now. So we're going through her journal and my sister found one particular entry where my mom and I were having this back and forth. I think I was 3 or 4 at the time. And she said in the journal that I had asked her, when do I get to be the boss? Now, this is coming from a 4-year-old who's at the bottom of the food chain as far as 10 kids go. I'm the last one. So there's no way I'm in charge of anything at this point. And I'm feeling the frustration of never being in charge when I'm a 4-year-old. And it's interesting because when my sister was going through that, she pointed out, she's like, it's interesting how that shaped you. Not just this one instance, but propagation of this feeling. It's shaped you into someone who owns a business, who leads from the front of the room because there was this little girl at 4 years old that felt like she could never be in charge. So she decided to make a life for herself where she could be. Now, that could have taken 100 different verticals. It could have meant 100 different things. But what this meant for me, I believe it turned into I struggled being heard or feeling like I got heard. I struggled feeling seen because I was always the next siblings up little sister. I didn't go through school by my name. I was like, this girl's little sister or this guy's little sister, or I was just at the tail end of the pack. I had virtually no identity for myself, and I had no coaching how to step into my own identity. And when I started to realize this, it was, gosh, in my 20s. It wasn't until I was in my mid 20s when I was like, I feel like I am everyone keeps telling me you have so much potential. You have so much potential. I was usually at the top of my class, usually had the best grades, but I felt like I had nothing to show for it. By the time you graduate school, that's all over. There's no popularity contest after high school, really. Especially when you move out of the state and you don't know anybody. So I'm sitting there in my 20s. I've started to be a mom because that's what I wanted to do. And that's what my family had all done. I went to college because I didn't even want to, if I'm being completely honest, but that's what I thought you were supposed to do. I followed my 9 older siblings through university and incurred a bunch of student debt. And I'm sitting there in my 850 square foot condo. I remember crocheting these leopard bands. That's what I was doing, this little small repetitive process that gets me thinking about other things. And I thought about what, where am I even going? What am I even doing? The word influencer was not even close to our vocabulary yet. Social media was barely a thing. I think this is the beginning of MySpace. So those of you that are in my age pool, welcome. This is Tony Robbins was still Anthony Robbins at the time. This is the kind of time frame it was. There wasn't a rise of coaching. There wasn't a rise of public speaking. It was just barely starting. And man, I wish I had ridden on that very, very, very first wave instead of just sitting directionless, wondering where my life was supposed to go. But I did at that point do what I knew how to do, which was listen to people that I respected, listen to people whose results I wanted to copy. And I kept my microscope on my oldest brother at the time. He had the family that I wanted. He had the home and the property that I wanted. He was living the life that I was hoping to live one day. And so when his wife, my sister-in-law, invited me to an event, I went because I felt like it must be some kind of indicator of success. going to events, doing what they're doing. Copying people who I deem to be successful must lead me to where they're going somehow. So I went to this event. I met Kirk Duncan. I can easily say he's my very first mentor, even though he probably doesn't know. But I took everything I could from his event. I bought every DVD that I could from his event. I bought every CD that I could from his event. I went to all of the other events that he was putting on, and I started to feel this kick in my chest of. I remember I was at event in particular. I was at the Holiday Inn just off of, I think it's like 54th South in Salt Lake. We were at this smaller event, and it was all about public speaking. And the event was called Present Yourself. And as I sat there in that event, I'll never forget the room I was sitting in. I was like, I remember where in the room I was sitting in. I remember the table being next to me. I remember being very pregnant with my son. And it was like someone took a smoke bomb and just exploded it on my chest with this feeling of, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to speak. You're supposed to get up there. And there's a big difference. And everyone that has ever seen a speaker on stage knows what I'm talking about. There's the speaker that's up there to show off and to show their ego and to show how cool they are and look at me and look how cool I am and blah, 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 blah. And we oftentimes confuse that with real mentorship, but you can tell the difference. That's why I say trust your gut. The other kinds of speakers get up there because they want to serve more than one person at a time. They can see the need in the audience. They can pick up on the energy of the room, and they can lead that energy to where everyone in the room feels better off because they were in that room. And that's a selfless speaker. That's what I felt. I remember sitting in that room, and I watched as I got to know the people. We had these little breakouts, and I watched this person go by me. And I swear, Samantha, I haven't talked about this very much at all, but this was like, it's like that movie. Have you seen Unbreakable with Bruce Willis? You know, when he's like, he can sense the energy of the people around him, just like when they walk by, he can kind of tell what's going on in their lives. Like, this person just went through a tragedy in their family, or this person just escaped something really scary and dangerous. I was sitting in that room, and I just was like hypersensitive and aware to the energy. And you guys know what I'm talking about. It's the energy when you walk into a room and you can tell if something good has just happened or something scary has just happened without anyone saying anything. You know that energy, right?
Right.
I started to pick up on that with everyone that walked by. And it was like this calling, this message. And I've come to understand what this is. When we are experiencing something that is good for us or good to us, and someone else's name pops in our mind, I have become a firm believer that it is because that person has said a prayer asking for the very thing that you're experiencing in that moment. That's a connection I have just come to understand. And that is what has put me on stage more often than not. I've had my fair share of ego trips. I've done it wrong before. I will admit that. But what has kept me to the stage is those moments when I get this random text message, unprompted, out of the blue, that says, "You have no idea, but you said exactly what I needed to hear today." I got one 2 days ago from someone who was listening to a podcast. So they said it wasn't even the latest episode, but they said, "How is it that you say the exact thing that I need to hear in that moment?" And that is what keeps me on stage, being able to provide more results like that for more people at a time.
Wow. That was powerful. I feel like we have, like, from hearing what you've been saying, like, I feel like we have, like, some things in common. I only have one sibling. I don't have 10 siblings, so I can't imagine, like, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But I definitely really felt connected with the part of, like, I was actually talking about this with Haley. We were talking about how, like, we're very similar but different at the same time, which is, like, so weird. It's like we realize we have a lot of the same fears and stuff, and it's like sometimes we feel so disconnected, but then I'm like, we're almost the same person also. It's kind of weird. But yeah, I basically was saying, like, how she was saying I's kind of more the person who speaks up. Like, I very much speak my mind, and then she's kind of a little bit more the opposite. She kind of holds back. And I was saying, like, I never used to be this way. I wasn't always like this. I told her, like, for a good amount of time I was through a situation where I lived with my dad and my stepmom, and I'm very much mama's girl. I spent my whole life living with my mom, so that already was like tough. But it very much was a setting where I felt like I couldn't say what I needed to say, like I wasn't heard. And that's why I really connected with that, because it's like that's why I'm so outspoken now, and sometimes I'm like maybe I shouldn't say certain things, but I'm like I'm afraid to not be heard. So it's like I would rather speak up even if I'm like okay, not everyone's going to like what I have to say, than to be quieted by other people. So I really
Amen.
connect with that.
We really are not served when we people please like that. When we're so scared of what the response might be that we don't say anything. And girl, I got to tell you, I am learning this lesson over and over and over and over again. Because when you're on stage in front of 1,000 people or 13,000 people, what you say has consequences. You might not ever see or hear all of them, but there are people that are listening to you that will take or not take action, either way, based on what you say. And you may or may never know. And if you're constantly curbing or hiding from your own brilliance or becoming less because you're afraid of what those consequences might be, then you are just vanilla. You're not worth listening to. None of us are. None of us are worth listening to if we're not willing to say the scary thing.
I agree with that. But it's like, yeah, it took me so long to get to that point, because it's just always the thing, especially the thing that really has been hard for me is like I grew up with technology and social media, and now it's like it's so easy to compare or to be like, what if, I post this certain thing? Is someone going to think this certain thought? But it's just like, I kind of I would say for my own mental well-being, I kind of do of like I'm gonna say what I need to say and like leave it at that. I'm not gonna be checking to see, oh, is someone, because I know deep down it's like anything I say, I'm not saying it out of ill intent. Like I'm saying stuff that
Right.
genuinely I think will help people, but sometimes it's like people pick certain things and kind of twist it, and I'm just like I just learned that I'm like everyone's gonna have their own opinion. That can't matter to me. Like I need to be true to myself. But it's
Yeah. Yeah.
very hard to be like that. It's so easy to be like so worried, but
Well, and that's why people don't write stories about us when we don't say anything. That's
right.
not where the hero's journeys come from. That's not the stuff that gets passed around because it's not really worth much because we left the plaster attached. And here's what I mean by that. When I took my daughter when she was 12 years old, crazy of me. I look back and like, what the hell was I thinking? I took my daughter to Cambodia and Thailand and Vietnam when she was 12. And in Bangkok, we'd stayed there for just one night, but we wanted to see the Golden Buddha. Have you heard of the Golden Buddha?
I don't think so.
Oh, this is crazy story. So there's this temple that has been built around this. I think it's about, I want to say it's like 20, 30 feet tall. It's a big one. This golden Buddha, and originally this Buddha was made out of gold from head to toe. Back when it was constructed, there was a lot of and I hope I tell this story right. I don't remember the exact timelines and if it was like Genghis Khan that was involved, but there was an invasion of the monastery. Now, somehow the monks had enough heads up, enough of a warning that this invasion was coming that they were able to cover this Buddha in plaster. Well, unfortunately, when the bad guys came through, nobody lived. The entire monastery was slaughtered, so nobody knew what was underneath all the plaster. Later on, I think it was I don't know if it was decades or centuries, but later on, there was a group of monks and archaeologists. They came through and they saw this plaster statue. And they're like, oh, this is really cool. We should really put this in the temple because they had decorated the plaster to look like a real Buddha. So this giant plaster Buddha is now being transported. But during the transport, it's overnight. It's not an easy ride. The plaster starts to crack and get chipped. Now, what happened was someone noticed it. And when they shined a light to look into it, they noticed something shining back. And so they took a risk and they uncovered all the plaster. They destroyed the statue in order to see the gold statue that was underneath. And that gold statue is now sitting in a temple in Thailand. You can go see it. It's absolutely incredible. But it's an example to me that I refer to often of these layers that we wear to hide ourselves. These plaster layers that are they're so thick and they're so opaque, and it's disguising what's really underneath, our message that's really underneath, the thing that we want to say that's scary that's really underneath. But here's the bottom line of it. We are most valuable when we are unadulterated, meaning gold is most when there's nothing else with it. A gold ring is more valuable than a gold combined with copper or a gold combined with iron ring. It's not pure gold. Much more valuable than a gold ring covered in plaster. So the more authentic you can be to yourself, and this sounds like really flowery language, like potpourri, like how do I actually be authentic? It takes practice. It takes really being willing to vocalize the thoughts that come into your mind if they are worth sharing. Sometimes it means being silent and letting that be your authentic self. You have to get to know yourself so well to say, and here's my litmus test. Do I like who I am when I'm alone? Do I like hanging out with me? Am I a good friend to myself? Am I, as an entrepreneur, am I a good boss to myself? And if I can answer yes to those things, then I know I'm the closest to my authentic self and my most valuable self that I can be.
Right. And that's something like I've talked about is like it took me so long to get to that point. Well, in my head so long, but I'm also like I it's a good and a bad thing where I have the mindset of like I have to be I'm need to be going all the time, and sometimes I'm like slow down, or like sometimes it like gets too overwhelming and then I'm just like okay, like it's a race I don't need to be in. Like I can go at my pace. My pace is my pace. But like for me throughout this journey, it's like been a few years since I started it, and it took me quite some time. I would say like within the last 6 months or to a year was when I finally was able to actually enjoy spending time with myself, which was so hard because it was like I was so I felt like all the time I needed other energy. Like I needed to be around people all the time. Like I couldn't just be alone. It was like scary to me.
Yeah.
And to like finally see it, it's like I actually now almost prefer most of the time to be alone. Like I like to I like to write and do research, and writing's honestly like one of my favorite things. I love to make lists, and like I just love office supplies and like cutesy things, and like it took me a while to be able to be that to that point. So it's like I definitely feel like now I can see more of certain situations where I realize like okay, I'm not being my true self. I don't like how this feels. And like having to like almost recenter and try to just in most cases I'm just like I'd rather be silent because I don't like the way I'm projecting myself because I don't feel like it's being my true self versus putting off an energy that I'm like it's not me. I don't want people to see something that's not really me.
Well, and part of that is, and you are figuring this out way earlier in life than I did. I was not that way. I thought that I was that way when I was 21, not even close. I've had such a major glow up since then in terms of coming to get to know myself. But I really think that there are we have to take risks. I have found that I've experienced relationships with people where I met them before I knew who I was. And, junior high and high school when I was first brand new married. And I have watched these relationships, and occasionally, not very often, occasionally I get this circle back of, man, I've been following your journey for the past couple of decades, and you're not the person I remember. And that sometimes can be for better or worse, but usually it's for the positive if they're bothering to reach out. And it's really rewarding when we get those messages that say, "Thank you for being willing to speak up." I have had that same message on my heart for a long time, which is why it just it serves more than just us when we say what needs to be said.
I agree. And I feel like too it's like yeah, I've had that where I've reflected so much on like friendships and stuff I've had. Like I had an 8-year friendship, and ended it, and then I came back, and then it was just like me going like fighting against myself, and then I finally was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't like who I am when I'm with this person, even though it was very much where I was comfortable, because it was like, okay, we've been friends for a long time. But I finally ended it, and it's like, looking back, it's like I don't regret it. I feel bad in those situations because I'm like, I wanted it to last, but it's also like I was only hurting myself by staying. So
Yep.
it's like so weird to look at relationships and being like, wow, a couple of years ago, it's like I wasn't the same person. And to see like how much I've changed, it's like, it's so, feels like outer worldly to me, if that makes
It's a bit
sense.
of a trip sometimes. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
it is. I don't know. Have you, like, I know, well, you've been in your journey a lot longer than I have, but it's like in the last few years, you still feel like you're going through that where you kind of notice like you're like just immediately like, wow, okay, I'm still outgrowing these people, certain people.
Well, yeah, I think yes and no. And I have come to a place where I have a really good baseline for who I love to surround myself with, who I love to be in proximity to. And that I've got a really stable, good place where it took me a lot of years, a lot of tuition to figure out who I want to be in the room with. However, I'm never going to say that I've ever arrived. How many of us have ever arrived? How many of us have
Right,
perfected growing? None of us have. I've only heard of one perfect person in the entire universe. That it's only ever happened one time. So to say that I'm not I, I'm done growing or I'm done learning, it's way off base. But I will say that I can accelerate the process. And when I accelerate the process of learning and becoming a better person, attracting better people into my life, eliminating people that I don't want proximity to with no negativity, no baggage, and I've done that the wrong way too before. It comes from making, like I said, making these decisions really, really fast and following your gut really, really fast. And most importantly, not taking advice from fear. Man, it is crazy when we there's people that I have nervousness about reaching out to, and that's such a beautiful lesson to me because if I'm nervous about reaching out to that person, that means I see myself as less than them. If I'm nervous about reaching out to a celebrity or a mentor, that's just a mirror saying, "Girl, you gotta level up." If you're fangirling so hard, you're creating this distance between who you believe yourself to be and what you believe your worth to be and this other person. And that's unbecoming. It's it's unattractive. And by unattractive, I don't mean like, oh, they're repelled by me consciously. That's not what's happening. There's this law of attraction that we've all heard of. If you've ever read The Secret or done any personal development, you know about this. The law of attraction says we are basically pulled in both directions to what is meant for us. And when we're pulled in both directions, that means the people that are seeking you and what you have are pulled to you as fast as you are pulled to them. And you can't do that if you perceive yourself to be anything less than.
yeah, I've kind of like gone through that recently. It's so funny because it's like I like when I tell people close to me, I'm like, you probably think I'm so delusional, but it's like I like being that way because it's like I don't know, I'm just in my own la la land. But I took like this self-care course recently. It's by, I've never heard of him before this, but his name's Jimmy Narain. And he was saying like pick like 5 people that you look up to the most and send them a message. And I did it recently, and I was like, I don't know why I felt so giddy. Like, one of the people was Tony Robbins, and I was like, I don't even care if he never sees this, but it just the fact that I even took the time to write out the message and I pressed send and was like, it just
Yeah.
felt so weird. But I've been like the last few days, I'm like, you watch, they're gonna respond to me, or like, and I'm just like, I know I sound delusional to my close peers because they're in a different journey. I would say like being an entrepreneur, it's like you're like you see everything so differently. And I know a lot of other people like close kind of are like, okay, you're crazy. That person's never gonna respond to you. And I'm like, yeah, you say that now. Just watch. I'm like, just watch. It's gonna happen. And
You know,
it,
and,
5 years from now, it's gonna happen.
and it doesn't matter because you're not waiting for it.
Right.
You're
I
not
just
like
like
sitting there doing nothing, waiting for Tony to get it back to you. That's the whole point is you're becoming the kind of person that not just Tony, but anyone would want to be around. I love that.
Thank you. I know. I'm just like, it's weird to see how I'm starting to feel like things aren't so far out of reach. Like I actually had someone reach out to me recently on LinkedIn, and this person has a lot of followers on Instagram, and I just was like, the fact that it's not even the status to me, but it's just more of like someone who, when you see that, you're like, okay, this person has taken time to build up their reputation. Like, that they've worked hard, and to see like the things that they do. And then just thinking like this person reached out to me, like it made me feel, I'm like, wow, I'm really not that far away from like where I want to be. So it's been really good lately. I've been really like feeling great. So.
That's awesome.
And I know, I feel like you've mentioned this before, but I forget. Have you met Tony Robbins before? I know you've been to like events, but
Yeah, no, I did. He invited me up on stage at one of his events recently. Not recently, it was in 2015. So it's been a minute, actually. Oh my gosh, it was 10 years ago. Ah, I just had that
crazy.
realization.
How was that
Wow.
experience?
It was really cool. I mean, he was a really tall guy. He's over 7 feet tall. So
I feel like you would be. He looks like you would be tall.
I'm 5'2". So it was funny when he got up on stage because he was just looking for an audience participant to come up and show how to introduce yourself. And he pretended to be this super intimidated guy, like super scared of all 5'2" of me. That was really sweet. But my favorite experience is, and I don't have a lot of proximity to Tony, and maybe someday, but like you, I'm not waiting for, I mean, it feels like to say that. It was a really cool moment. I'm not gonna lie. Really cool moment. Massive, massive respect to Tony and what he's built. And I've actually increased my admiration of what he's doing in his own book of life because of where he came from. But the coolest part about that event was actually his MC, Joseph McClendon.
Hmm.
Amazing guy. He's in his 70s. He's fit and strong and ripped and healthy, and he's just an incredible orator at the same time. And when I saw Joseph at the time, that was my role. I was the MC of events. Joseph is an MC of Tony events, or at least was when I was with him. I'm not sure what he's doing now. I know Joseph runs his own events as well. But I was like, oh man, if I could MC Tony Robbins' event, that'd be so cool. I've gone on now and I put the other people in the MC role, and that's really fun. But the thing that I said to myself is like, you watch one day I'm going to have Joseph McClendon's phone number in my phone. You just wait. One day. He has no idea who I am. The next day, Joseph invited me up on the stage with another participant. It's what you get when you sit in the front, right? You get a lot of impromptu stage visits. And within 2 years, circles had blended enough, networking had happened enough to where I had Joseph's phone number. And I remember the day that I got a 3-way text with Joseph on it, introducing me to Joseph. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to tell him because it's going to sound super weird, but I manifested this. Like, I now have his phone number, and I haven't abused it. I'm not going to like go crazy on him, but I have texted him a couple times when I had questions. And he's been so generous and so kind with his time. And I thought, how exemplary. Yeah, that's the kind of attitude and the kind of person I wanna be like. And when I say I wanna be like a person, it's not that I want to be them. Many of us make that mistake when they're like, "I'm gonna be the next Tony Robbins," or "I'm gonna be the next Mel Robbins," or "I'm gonna be the next." No, 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 no. They are already taken. You
Exactly.
don't want to be the next them. You want to be the first you. That's authenticity. Now, I won't say that you don't want to avoid becoming like them in certain attributes. I like to think of it this way. We're all writing our book of life. We're all experiencing life. We have highs, lows, lefts, right, sideways. We have the epic fail chapters and we have the massive win chapters. However, when we meet people whose results we admire, whose personalities we admire, whose behaviors we admire, those are indicators. And that's when we ask ourselves, what do I like about how this person is presenting themselves? And what page from their book of life would I like to put into mine? Are they a fantastic mom? Are they homeschooling? And I want to do that too. Are they a fantastic orator, an amazing speaker? Are they a natural leader? And I'm going to take these pages, not chapters, not books, but just pages, sometimes maybe even paragraphs or a sentence or two from other people's books that I admire, and I'm going to use them to write my book of life. And that way becomes truly authentic and unique to me.
I agree. I feel like, um, and kind of like, I always say I struggle with squirrel brain, so I try to sift through. I'm like, okay, the first part of what you talk, so I'm like, sorry if I, for a second, I'm like, wait, what was I gonna say? But yeah, I feel like when it comes to thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be the next person, I felt like personally for me, it was kind of where I didn't feel confident that other people would choose me in itself. Like people would come for me. It was more of thinking, you know what I mean? And I've sorted through that, but I feel like that's kind of where it becomes a thing of like, oh, I need to be like this person because that's worked, and I don't think people are gonna want to be there for me. So I can see where that comes from. It's taken me quite some time to be like, no, I am enough. I'm enough. Like people want me. I'm different. I have my own things that, make me unique. And I just feel like it just kind of takes some time to be like, okay, I'm enough. It's not, I don't have to be this like this other person to become, where I want to be and become successful. And then my other thought with like like choosing certain parts, that was actually like part of that self course I did. I made like, I'm too extensive on certain things, so I take it extensively. I'm like, I didn't need to, but I made like categories, and then I chose like 5 people in each category of life that like I want to have, and then chose 5 qualities from each person. But it was like, it was a lot more simplified, and I'm like, no, I need it to be for, this certain thing, like sales. Who are the 5 salespeople I look up to, and then kind of like divvying it up like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm very like, I love lists, so I like making them extensive.
I do too. I'm a big checklist person. When you said office supplies, I was like, yes, I love the binder with the collated tabs. I've got an inner Leslie Nope that's very, very strong.
Yeah, I have an obsession. It's also part of me. I feel like it's my inner child. I felt like, I at one point struggled with like homelessness, and there's a
Mm.
lot of things that like they're so simple. Like they're just from a dollar store that I was like, oh, back then I couldn't get, and now it's like I will buy those things even I'm like I don't need it, but it's solely of the fact of I'm feeding that inner child, and I choose to do those things. I'm like, do I really need another notebook? I already have like 72 other ones. No, but it's just it feeds that part, and it makes me happy.
Yeah.
So I know we're kind of nearing the end, so I like to, towards the end, kind of give you like 5 minutes or so, just kind of talk about anything that maybe we didn't touch on, things that you would think are important that you want to share.
Well, I get asked the question a lot of podcasts that, and I've adopted it for my own actually, is what is the number one message that you would leave, knock on wood, if you lost the ability to speak tomorrow? What would
Hmm.
you say today? And this really hit just again, that kick in the chest happened right before we hopped on. I texted you about it before. I had a friend who was on a Zoom call, and she was actually chatting with my husband. They're working out a business deal, and she's like, "Hey, I need to catch up with you. There's something I want to share, but I need Marianne in the room." So, I mean, we're really good friends in anyway. And so I was like, "Yeah, sure. I bet you're in a business meeting. What's going on?" My curiosity was more than piqued. I was concerned at this point. And with respect to her story, I'll let her tell it. But she dropped a bomb of some life altering news that it's one of those things that makes you zoom out on life and makes you think about, how am I spending my time? What if I were in the same position? What would I do? Would I keep doing everything that I'm doing if I knew my timeline? I keep this little hourglass on the back of my shelves over here as a reminder that no time is guaranteed. None. You don't have tomorrow. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. God forbid that something tragic should happen before our time. But it's just not promised. So when I speak to speakers, when I speak to women in business, when I speak to CEOs, when I speak to people that are really up to big things, oftentimes, and I know this because I personally have been subject to it too, we all do this. We get caught up in what I call the glorification of busy. We get braggadocious about how full our calendar is or how many appointments we have, about how in demand we are. And we lose our ability to be present. And when we lose our ability to be present, we lose our ability to serve, which is why I believe my best operating system comes when I operate from a full cup, meaning my first appointment in the morning isn't for somebody else, it's for me, so that I can do my stretch break, I can do my routine, so that the rest of the day I am so full, so fulfilled that it is overflowing into other people. And if I could leave the world with one message that gets repeated over and over and over again after I'm gone, it's number one, do what fulfills you so that you can do number two, which is to fulfill others.
I love that. I've never heard that, like, or been asked that question. I haven't been on another podcast. I'm actually going on my first podcast next week. So I'm like,
Congrats, that's awesome.
thank you. I'm nervous because I have only been a host, so it's like kind of a thought of, I'm like, oh, gosh, what am I going to talk about? Or like, I feel like it's such a big thing because it's like I'm used to being in the other seat of, asking
Mhm.
other people questions. So it's, but yeah, I feel like I wouldn't even know the answer to that, but I feel like now it makes me want to give that some thought, like what would be my message that I would leave. But I think that's really good, especially with, like, I know some people kind of get caught up and kind of neglect, like, having that set time, to themselves. And like with me trying to, over time create a routine of like, okay, what are certain things that are important to me? Well, I really think, like, before I was the person, I would just rush to work. I would get up not like 20 minutes before work, and I would just like throw stuff on and go to work. And it's like seeing the difference of actually setting aside time to myself before going to work, like, it makes such a difference on the whole day. Like, just being
Yeah.
like, okay, I had that time where I just, like you said, like, I could be present and I could just focus on, okay, what are things important to me, like you said, stretching, making sure like I'm getting water in, because I've that's been a thing of mine where I'm like, so easy to be like, no, water has no flavor, or I'm like, then I'm like, no, water is good for you. Like, it nourishes your body. So it's like I've really been working on, okay, what are certain things that I need to do every day to be like, wow, I really loved how today went. And obviously there's gonna be things where it's like, you have struggles with like certain people on the phone where people get angry because like I work kind of in a customer service job. So, but it's like, how did the overall day look? Wow, okay, I did these things that really are important to me. And it really does make a difference.
It absolutely does. And you're right, that battery charge. I'd speak of, and when we were at the event, I said this from stage, right? If we forget to plug this in overnight, that's like the first priority when we wake up is make sure my phone has battery, make sure my phone has charge. But we neglect to do that with ourselves most of the time, more often than not. Simon Sinek put it really well. He said, I shouldn't have a job. And my interest was piqued. What do you mean, Simon? He said, I shouldn't have a job because if all of us were taking care of ourselves, in his case, good orators, good communicators, then I shouldn't be employed. I shouldn't have, this shouldn't exist. But the truth is that we just need help. We need support. We need inspiration. We need encouragement. It's like a shower, it doesn't last your whole life. We've
Mm-hmm.
got to redo it and redo it and redo it and keep our cups full because we will have demands on our energy. And the goal is to be so full that when that taxing conversation comes, when that big demand on your energy knocks on your door, because we know it will, that you have the reserves to attack it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually didn't know who he was, like, for the longest time, but recently, like, I love listening to motivational video compilations, and I came across like a few of his, and I was like, wow, like, I really like the things that he shares. There's so many speakers out there, it's hard to be like, okay, who should I listen to based on like what I want to work on. I
Mhm.
definitely love like listening to like Eric Thomas. He's one of my biggest ones that I'm like, put them on because I'm very much, I like the military, like kind of yelling at me. I'm like, I don't know why I like it. It's just always been, I guess I'm kind of stubborn, so that would make sense. Like, I like someone being like, yeah, get it together. Like, I, but
Sir.
that's, yeah. No, because like some of the ones of his that I listen to, it's like him saying, like, one of my favorite ones I almost listen to almost every day. It's like, you have enough right now to, he's like saying, like, to get your life together, get out of debt, like saying all this stuff. And I'm just like, I will listen to him and I'll be in the shower, I'll be like, I do. And I'm like, I'm going along with him. I'm like, yes, tell me again. I want to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like that too. I like a little bit of militaristic get up and get at it.
Yeah, I know some people take soft perch, but I'm just like, for me, I believe if I'm gonna like to have something ingrained, I need someone yelling at me. Like, I'm like, and it's a tough love thing. I very much enjoy tough love. I don't know why, but
It's just the way you're wired. It's the warrior personality inside of you.
yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes we need that nurturing, but it's also like, I feel like in a lot of situations, it's like, okay, how did I get here? Well, I mean, it wasn't being like, oh no, it's okay. Or I'm like, no, it was someone telling me, like, you need to work on this. This is something that, and obviously it's like in those moments, so especially being young, you want to think like, oh, this person's just, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just being mean to me. Like, they're hating. And it's like, no, you always realize, like, especially your older peers, it's like, no, they're telling because they care. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It comes from a place of love. That's the most effective.
yeah. So I know we're nearing that. Was there so for anyone who would like to find you, if you could let us know where we could find you?
Oh yeah, well, I'm all over social media, but when I'm on podcasts, especially, my thing is speaking and putting people on stages whose messages I can get behind. So I like to give stuff away whenever I appear on shows. Anyone that's listening to Samantha's podcast, this is what I like to do. I have a podcast database of over 1,000 shows. Now, all of these shows have said that they're not going to charge for guests, and they don't play that weird game. They just put their application links, and I put all of this in a database. So I give that away to anyone that's listening. If your message needs to be shared, podcasting, just like we're doing here, is a great way to do it. So you just go to mariannehickman.com/database. You can download that entire database. It's free. I just give it away. And then we can hang out on social media and see if we can get your message more out there, because Samantha can't reach everybody. I can't reach everybody. Tony Robbins can't reach everybody. There are people that need to hear your message from you specifically. So let's hang out online. I'm really excited to see, if you listen to this episode and you want to hang out, send me a message on Instagram and tell me what you liked about the episode, and we'll do more of that for you.
I love that. And I know you sent me like a link. It had like a bunch of links on it. Did you want me to link that as well? All the stuff on that?
Oh, you can if you want to, whatever you like to put in the show notes. So the giveaway is great on there so people can access that as well.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we're in that last couple minutes, but we're going to wrap up. I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I again apologize how much rescheduling it took to get us
Oh,
here.
don't worry about it.
I'm just glad it happened because like I said, it's like you were honestly part of the beginning of my journey. That event was honestly towards like the beginning. So it's like very cool to see us wrapping around like, whoa, now we're on a podcast together. So
I know, right? It's
and I would love to, I
awesome.
know we were kind of talking about going on yours. I'd love to do that as well if you still wanted to.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, we thank you guys for hanging out with us and for getting to know more about Marianne. You guys can check out the podcast. We're pretty much on any streaming platform. I used to list the whole thing, but it just is too long to ramble. You guys, whatever you prefer, I will have that linked as well as Marianne's link for all the podcasts if you want to apply to that and to reach out to her. We hope you have a great Monday night, and I will see you guys actually in a couple hours. I have another episode in a couple hours. So,
Woo!
see you in a couple hours.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Night.
God bless.
God bless. Bye.